A triangle has vertices P, Q and R. The coordinates of P are -3, -6. The coordinates of Q are 1, 4. The coordinates of R are 5, -2. M is the midpoint of PQ. N is the midpoint of QR. Prove that MN is parallel to PR. You must show each stage of your working. So the first thing we're going to want to do is draw out the triangle PQR so that we can visualise our workings. So if this is our triangle PQR, then the coordinates of P are -3, -6. The coordinates of Q are 1, 4. And then the coordinates of R are 5, -2. Next we can mark M and N onto our triangle. So M is the midpoint of PQ. So our line PQ is this line here. So M will be roughly here. And then N is the midpoint of QR. And our line QR is this line here. So N will be around here. So we're trying to prove that line MN is parallel to line PR. Now one way to do this is to prove that their gradients are the same. So in order to do this, we'll need to work out what the coordinates of M and N are. So the sum of the two x terms divided by 2 and then the sum of the y terms divided by 2 gives us the midpoint of a line. So this means that the midpoint of line QP will be equal to 1 plus -3 divided by 2 and then 4 plus -6 divided by 2. And if we work this out, this gives us an x-coordinate of -1 and a y-coordinate of -1. So we therefore know that coordinate M is -1, -1. Next we can move on to point N. So point N is the midpoint of line QR. So we can use the same process as before. The x-coordinate will be equal to 1 plus 5 divided by 2. And the y-coordinate will be equal to 4 plus -2 divided by 2. And this gives us an x-coordinate of 3 and a y-coordinate of 1. Now the next thing we need to do in order to prove that line MN is parallel to line PR is work out the gradients of the two lines. So y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1 gives us the gradient, which is the same as writing change in y over change in x. So if we start off with line MN, our first y-coordinate is -1 and our second y-coordinate is 1. And then our first x-coordinate is -1 and our second x-coordinate is 3. So we can substitute this into the formula for the gradient. So this tells us that the gradient for MN is 1 minus -1 divided by 3 minus -1. And this gives us an answer of 1/2. Next line PR. So our first y term will be -6, our second y term will be -2, and then our first x term will be -3, and our second x term will be 5. And if we substitute this into the gradient formula, this will give us -2 minus -6 divided by 5 minus -3. And again, if we work this out, this gives us an answer of 1/2. Now what we can see is that both gradients for line MN and line PR are the same. So we've therefore proven that MN is parallel to PR. So the final thing we'll want to do is write a summary statement. So we can write something along the lines of line MN and PR are parallel because they both have a gradient of 1/2. Now this question's worth 4 marks. We'll get our first mark for working out the coordinates of both M and N. We'll get our second mark for starting to work out the gradient of line MN and PR. We'll get our third mark for working out the correct gradient. And our final mark for the conclusion with the supporting evidence.